When darkness descended upon Fire Island, it covered the land. There were zero public lights on any of the walkways outside of the harbor. Under the canopy of trees that loomed over the turnoff for Shore Climb Lane, it was even darker than it had been during my jog over here. At least during the jog, I had had the moonlight. It had guided me through the dirt ravine running parallel to Fire Island Boulevard. Now, turning right onto Shore Climb, I was under the canopy of trees. Even the moonlight was no longer my ally. I walked through the darkness for a minute before pausing, bringing my phone up to my face. My tracking dot was now nearly on top of 7W Bayview Lane. Just then, a blossoming of sparks erupted into the night air. I could barely see them through this canopy of trees. I proceeded, straining to catch glimpses of golds, blues, and pinks as they popped open into the night sky just beyond this canopy of trees. I realized my phone was no longer getting a signal. I used the flashlight function to begin inspecting the numbers posted each of the gates I was passing. I persisted along Shore Climb Lane, closer and closer to the Great South Bay. I stopped at a house at the left end of Shore Climb, just feet shy of Bayview Lane. Bayview Lane extended perpendicularly off towards the right. It went back towards the middle of town, towards the commercial district. I squinted, stepping closer to the gate before me. 7W Bayview Lane. Jackpot. Wait, I've been here before. This is the house that I visited that night last summer with Finn, where I saw the... I turned off the flashlight and pocketed my phone. In my left hand, I still clutched the shirt dress I needed to return. I found the electronic panel on the right side of the trellis framing the doorway before me. I pushed its intercom button. I couldn't hear anything. The magnanimous bursts coming to fruition in the night sky to my right continued. I pushed the button again. I felt a shiver despite the warm cloak of July air. I tried calling the man who owned the shirt. The call wasn't going through. Behind me and to my right, there was an entire row of exterior gate doors, each with a house behind them. And I had just passed a dozen houses coming here along Shore Climb Lane, several of them offering a fishbowl glimpse of people inside, lounging or eating. I wanted this knowledge to assuage my nervous stomach. Now I knocked on the gate. Nothing. Darren. I jumped from my skin, lunging towards Bayview Lane. It was better lit here, lacking Shore Climb's canopy of trees. I heard the voice again. Is that you? It was coming over an intercom. The gate's unlocked if you'd like to come in. It was his voice, all right, the voice of Stranger Queen from the Ice Palace earlier today. Shirt still in hand, ribcage barely restraining my heart, I crept closer to the trellis as I took a deep breath in and out. The intercom cackled back to life. I'm sorry, I'm on some medication, Stranger said from the other end. I'm moving slowly. I can meet you at the backyard door in just a minute. Please come in. I put my hand on the gate door, opening it an inch, and stopped. I turned around, looking at the houses around me. I checked in with the wafts of party music coming all the way from the other end of Bayview Lane. I could even make out the dark silhouettes of a couple boys leaving a house 2 or 3 doors down. I heard their hoots and cackles as they wandered away from me towards town. I suddenly felt quite silly. I'm a grown man, I thought. I gave my friend this address. I am surrounded by 700 houses on the busiest night of the year. I cannot be scared. The apparition, it had been trying to tell me something. I might never have another chance to come back and discover what. Somehow that night, last June, I had not been afraid of a ghost. That had to mean something. It did. Did it mean that on the other side of this door, I would find what the fortune teller saw for me? Something valuable returned to me. Could it be the power of safety? There was an 8-year-old counting on my courage now. I could hear him asking. I began walking forward. I could hear him asking me to stop. Please stop. I would if I could, but it's too late. I am hypnotized by the spindle. It's my turn now to be pricked. 25 months earlier, June 2011, Manhattan. That Friday night, we crossed the lobby of Adriel's high-rise building located on the southeast corner of 8th Avenue and 52nd Street. Our elevator looked like it belonged on a cruise ship during the early 80s. It was essentially a cage of glass. It lifted our foursome up to the carpeted hallway of the 23rd floor. Well, look at you, Mister. Jasper murmured to Adriel as we slipped inside and admired the broad apartment that Adriel had all to himself. It was a spoil, we learned, of his work as a world-beloved pornographic film performer and erotic masseuse. Half an hour later, we were all giggling. We took turns playing DJ on Adriel's computer. We pranced around, becoming increasingly imaginative on the hardwood floor of the large studio apartment. It was now becoming our catwalk. What if we all, started doing our struts in our undies? I ventured, secretly just lustful to see Adriel in his. Within a minute, we were cheering each other down our catwalk in our briefs. I was surprised that my cohorts had laughingly obliged my request. Amidst our disarmed jubilation, something began to swell, but it wasn't encased by stretch cotton. It wasn't below my waist. It was just below my throat, and it was encased by my rib cage. Blood began to enter my hips and arms. I found myself dancing with abandon, with sensuality. The symphony of Britney Spears and Rihanna collided with our laughter. This was the first time I'd ever done something like this. We were a group of grown men prancing around in our underwear like uninhibited 4-year-olds in diapers. Waves of euphoria washed over me. Bewitching night was rising from her tomb, and courteous evening began slipping away. I dared Jasper and Vincent into trying on some of the kinky role-play costumes that Adriel kept stashed in his closet for visits with clients. Jasper looked like he was practically swallowed by Adriel's fireman outfit. He seemed like a boy who was trying on his father's uniform. Vincent cackled and shook his head at himself as he pulled on the clothes of a logger. Then I auditioned for the daytime Emmy I'd yet to earn as a big rig truck driver. Howdy, ma'am. I chewed an imaginary cud as I tipped my invisible 10-gallon hat. You a trucker, a farmer, or a cowboy? Asked Jasper. Girl, complained Vincent, identity crisis. Yes, I laughed. Yo, you left me the best for last, chuckled the costumes owner. Adriel reached into the back of his closet, swiftly squeezing himself into a cop uniform. No! I yelled. Fuck, I didn't see that one. Vincent said, I think there's a joke to be had here about the village people. I keep hearing about the village people, I said. Were they people who wrote a newspaper for Greenwich Village? Yeah. Are we going to go out dancing? Vincent quizzed an hour later. We were strewn about the apartment. Oh, we definitely are, I answered from in front of Adriel's full-length mirror. I was trying on every one of his tank tops, flexing in each. In the subsequent hours, something exceptional would come to pass in the belly of the nightclubs. On the dance floor, I would shed my habit of repressing my dancing when in public and of hiding behind a caricature when I did have the audacity to dance. This transformation would be coaxed from me by Vincent and his unbridled, radically sissy gyrations, his head bobs and hand gestures, his scintillating jaw snaps. The change would be complemented by Adriel's good-natured rocking on the dance floor and Jasper's gleeful wiggling to the music. That night, I would topple a quarter-century regime of imprisoning my soul's deepest yearnings. Now we pranced out of Adriel's apartment and crowded into his apartment building's cruise ship style elevator. Vincent hit the button for the lobby. We began plummeting downward towards the big, pulsing, sweaty playground of Hell's Kitchen. As we descended, I could not have imagined that within these next few hours, I'd birth myself into the habit of crying out, "Girl!" to anyone I considered my homegirl, regardless of their gender or sexuality. In that moment, as we landed on the ground floor of Adriel's apartment building and the doors of the glass-lined elevator parted, the only thing that I could feel was relief and excitement over what awaited me outside the cage of glass. End scene. July 4th, 2013, 10:30 a.m., Long Island. The doors opened. Male bodies spilled from every train car, instantly flooding the outdoor platform. We wiggled with each other in slow motion. Everyone's civility seemed challenged. The sheer volume of jostling comrades provided an unsettling urgency. The human wave poured itself down a short ramp towards the parking lot. 4 off-white shuttle vans awaited us, but I knew each vehicle only held about 30 seats. It wouldn't be enough. There were way more than 120 of us. We perhaps outnumbered 240. As soon as my feet hit the pavement of the parking lot, I shimmied to the furthest van. I knew the fewer people in line, the better our chance for getting on board. Casey and I were fortunate. We were ahead of a large portion of the crowd, it seemed. When it was our turn, we each stuffed a $5 bill in the hand of the driver guarding the door. We climbed on board, grabbing a pair of adjacent seats. Casey took the window, I the aisle. Within seconds, all 30 seats were full of buzzing boys. Another 40 seconds, and the narrow strip of aisle running between the seats was packed with standing men. The driver climbed on, closing the door. The little bus heaved to life. The standers braced by grabbing hold of the felt-lined rims of the overhead luggage compartment. We paused at the edge of the parking lot, blinker on. Across the street lay a sprawling, neatly manicured field. Sayville High School was emblazoned on the building behind the field. We paused in front of train tracks before continuing our surge. Most of the roads we passed were fairly tidy, a few unkempt. We passed 2-story homes and businesses. There was, a quaint movie theater, a petite yoga studio, an old-fashioned pizzeria, an ice cream parlor. This town seemed to embody peace, but we were just passing through, on our way to its shore. There we would set sail to our final destination, a bombastic apparition of gay paradise. Someone had once explained to me that gay refuges sprouted mostly at the actual ends of the earth. It was only there we could build civilizations of safety. The person who explained this had provided adequate examples to back his story up. There was the island of Key West, the southernmost dot of continental America, suspended precariously in the Gulf of Mexico. There was Provincetown, curled at the furthest tip of the vast winding peninsula of Cape Cod. And there was Fire Island, a sandbar that dangled dangerously in the Atlantic Ocean. Figuratively, Fire Island was the Hope Diamond, hanging from a man's muscular, Sweat glistened nape as he looked over the edge of a precipice comprised of too many stories to fathom. It was the central in a string of exquisitely long, exotically thin barrier islands, and only a fraction of Fire Island was civilized. The balance was a frontier of unspoiled wilderness. The entire island's existence was audacious, practically blasphemous. It rested on an underwater shelf many miles long, but less than 1,000 feet wide. The land was Atlantis incarnate, ephemeral, sun-drenched glory. Perhaps it'd take one tidal wave to wash over the width of the island, wiping it out entirely. No one could promise Fire Island 7 more days, let alone 7 more decades. The fragile nature of her physiological existence was something she shared with the 3 generations of queer people who'd roosted beneath her wings. Perhaps that was part of the reason why we were inexorably drawn to her. About 20 townships dotted the entire multi-mile length of Fire Island, but I, like most I knew, had only been to 2, the adjacent magical kingdoms of Cherry Grove and the Pines. Between these 2 villages lay a legendary, tidy forest, and it was full of weaving hills and crisscrossing trails, and it was called the Meat Rack. It was a legendary gay cruising land. In some ways, the 2 towns existing on either side of the thicket of lust, the Pines and Cherry Grove, were pointedly different from each other. The Grove was the epitome of inclusive community, with its diversity, its robust lesbian minority, its dignified cottages, and its full-bellied men. The Pines was the epitome of exclusive cornucopia, with its sophisticated fashion, its jaw-dropping physiques, and its estates that were, in some cases, designed by world-renowned architects. Pines' homes were often shrouded by trees and tucked covertly away, hidden behind winding walkways, tall fences, and walls of imported bamboo. The Grove was crunchy. The Pines was competitive. The bus we were riding was nearly done, rattling over the roads of the idyllic Long Island suburb of Sayville. Casey was looking at me. "Do we know how Fire Island got its name?" he asked. "I once asked someone that," I said. "Apparently, once upon a time at night, pirates would light fires on the beach to lure passing ships. The ships would then get caught in the narrow channels between the sandbars, leaving them vulnerable to, be plundered." And I drew my finger across my throat. "Woof," he said as we began rising. "I know," I said, "but don't worry. The only kind of plundering I've had out there was the kind I wanted." Okay. I giggled. That evil pirate business, the luring and the murdering business, that's all in the past. I felt a shiver. "At least," I added, "as far as I know." 23 months earlier, August 2011, Fire Island Pines. Clouds began to enter the sky. I pulled myself out of the water and walked, dripping, to the DJ booth, which was operating out of a roofed-in bar on the side of the yard. I briefly talked to the DJ earlier, a cute, dark-haired young man with a tan deep and a smile sweet. "These songs are amazing," I now said to the DJ. "Thank you," he responded. "You know what I'd really like?" "What?" He smiled, honestly looking me right in my eyes. I pulled my shoulders back, holding his gaze. "If there's any way you could play Teenage Dream, that'd be amazing." We kept looking at each other for another moment, smiling. I could see from the corner of my eye Eden climbing out of the pool, coming straight towards us. When Eden reached the DJ booth, the words he spoke ostensibly formed a question. His intonation made them a statement. Do you want to go to the roof? Oh my God, I thought, you're jealous. I looked between them, allowing myself to bask in the dazzling, unfamiliar luxury. Jesus, I thought, younger Darren, hold on. You're going to have to learn to breathe underwater. It's going to have to be like this, not because of anything that you did wrong, but one day it will flip. And when that day comes, you will feel a kind of gratitude that other people may not. The fantasy and the power that you get from music and music videos, that's going to become your real life. You've got to learn to breathe underwater. Roof sounds fun, I answered Eden casually. I ran my hands down my torso and legs, slicking off water. I followed him inside and up the staircase. I stopped on the second floor, peeking into the first open bedroom I saw. I wondered if there was enough privacy. I smiled at him as we moved into the room. Suddenly, loud voices from the hallway, people spilling from a bathroom. Maybe, I said to him, we should go to the roof after all. On the third story of the house, we found the correct door and exited onto the balcony. The open vista that greeted us was stunning. I could see for what felt like tens of miles out over the ocean. I strode slowly up to the railing, ignoring the circus below. Eden came up behind me. I turned, looking in his eyes of piercing cobalt as he wrapped me in his arms. He leaned into my face and began to kiss me. I felt myself begin to melt into his strong, muscular embrace. From behind his body were voices emerging onto the balcony. I'd hoped there wouldn't be anyone up here, he murmured. I turned back around in his arms and looked out at the ocean. More clouds were entering the sky. 2 stories below us, the song reverberating from the professional speakers crescendoed. A ripple of guitar strings. They almost sounded like piano keys. Is this real? I thought. A woman's soft inhale followed immediately by her delicate, high-pitched singing. I spun in Eden's arms. I have to go downstairs. I sprang across the balcony, dodging those just entering the roof deck. I was a child on Christmas morning, cascading down the staircase, my heart overflowing with delirium of what awaited me at the bottom. The singer's voice and her rhythmic, catchy beat were now flooding the house. The song had already sunk its proverbial cushiony locking mechanisms around my body. I was strapped into the ride. I was fully committed. I reached the ground floor and ran over hardwood flooring strewn with plastic cups and beach towels. The song had begun as a ballad and was now beginning to show its hand. It was actually a roller coaster, and we were merely being ticked up its first breathtaking mountain. Bursting onto the pool deck, I spotted Rico. Yelling with glee, I jumped into the shallow end of the pool, motioning for her to join me. The song had reached the top of its roller coaster track. The song's synths roared as the singer's voice, now muscular and blunt, dove head first down its 1,000-foot drop. Rico and I splashed and jumped, screaming along. As the song entered its second verse, the singer returned to her softer head voice. I felt myself breathing, a respite from the pummeling wind I'd survived during the 1,000-foot drop. There in the pool, I wrapped my arms around myself, literally hugging myself. The song floated past me out to sea. I moved my hands to my chest, stroking myself there too before lifting my fingers to sensually graze my throat. I released my fingers from my throat and resumed splashing and singing along with Rico. The song was climbing towards its second crest. There was an emotional, commanding power to the singer's voice. The power pop beat and its retro synths seemed to dive underwater. The singer's voice, too, had slipped into a falling echo. The song, it sounded, was closing. I grasped Rico's delicate hands, widening my eyes as I stopped the thrashing of my body. The waves we'd made in the pool began to dissipate. Suddenly, the song began its plunge down its third and final summit. I closed my eyes and screamed along in glee. You make me. Eyes still closed, a flash memory barged in of me soaring across a desert in an open air Jeep. The vehicle was old school, not of this era. It rattled with adrenaline. I stood on my seat. The wind whipped my face. I gripped the frame of the Jeep with my left hand. With my right arm, I pumped the air. Music floating from our stereo was swallowed whole by our speed. In my mind's eye, I could just make out the driver down below to my right. He was a decade older than me. The wind threw his longish brown hair around his face, framing delight which matched mine. He looked like a real life version of Prince Eric from The Little Mermaid. I opened my eyes. The memory had been stunning, but I'd never been in an open air Jeep or where they drive on the right side of the road. So whose memory was that? Rico was still before me, laughing with abandon. Rico's long, exquisite black hair bounced all around. Eden, at the side of the pool, was staring at me. I looked back at Rico, clasping hands one final time as we jumped, bopping our heads in unison, yelling, singing. The singer's voice was driving us home over a track bed of electric guitars. I let my hands slip out of Rico's and lift towards the sky. I felt them begin to drift down my chest, down my abdomen, down to my hips. The ride had reached its end. I climbed out of the ride and onto the platform next to me. This platform was different than the one I'd begun on, or maybe I was the one who had changed. I have made it past mountains. Trailing pool water, I sprang over to the DJ. Thank you, I gushed. That, you played the song. He smiled at me bashfully from behind the booth. Eden came up to me. I want to get you alone. Can we get out of here? I found Vera. Vera's ex-girlfriend had disappeared, but now Topeka was with her. Topeka was truly a vision. Long, lush, brunette hair, a full face of makeup, bedroom eyes, curves in all the right places, long legs. Her lips looked like they'd just been stung, and across her shapely, nearly naked body, she wore a pageant sash. May I call you Topeka? I said, or do you prefer Ms. Topeka is fabulous, darling. I have to say, Topeka, You have a true sense of self. I really admire that. Oh, why, thank you, darling. She smiled, a high, feathery voice oozing from her bee-stung lips. From the buffet of life to pick a tries, to enjoy many dishes. I, I want to be you when I grow up. Oh, darling, she laughed, take a number. Eden came up to me. I looked at Vera. I'm going to go, I said. Is that okay? Vera gave me her trademark pensive look, looking just over my forehead. Yes. I hope you won't worry about me, I said, because now I know the way home. End scene. July 4th, 2013, 12 p.m., Long Island, New York. The boat's engine was loud. We were beginning to move away from the dock. I felt myself standing, panic coursing up to my eyes. I'd left my precious Lola behind. I'd left on shore, accidentally, the bag with practically my entire drag outfit in it. On this, the day where everyone had to be dressed in drag to participate in the adventure of a lifetime. I was standing now. Through my hazy vision, I could sense several of the passengers' eyes drifting to me. I was flooded with the knowledge I'd be really embarrassed for speaking up. Oh my God, I began whispering, and I knew I'd feel even worse if I didn't say something. A few seconds ago, the only crewman on board, other than the captain, had finished undoing the rope that had tethered our dinghy to the dock. This man, the skipper, was now looking at me. I left it up there, I stammered. She must have fallen off a railing. My voice sounded like someone else's. Can I please just go get it? It has to be right there. I pointed. Oh my God. I sensed that we were now stopping in the water. The engine idled as we bobbed. An exchange began to take place between the two men manning our craft. I muttered, oh my God, Lola. One of the passengers sprang to her feet. A good grace, baby. I turned to her in slow motion. She looked at me with wide, compassionate eyes. You left your dog? She thought Lola was a dog. No, I wanted to say, she's my drag character, my costume. I opened my mouth to correct her, but nothing came out. Good grace, the woman repeated. She took my numb silence as an affirmative answer. Most of the eyes on the vessel were watching me now. I felt myself lifting an arm pointing to the parking lot. Can't I please just go get and this captain's voice was loud. Okay, here's the deal. We're holding everyone up. We're the last boat. I'm not supposed to take you back, but I will. But we cannot wait for you to come back. Sorry, fella. No, 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 no. I have to get back on. I have to be able to. Casey's voice came to me from behind. It was loud enough to reach me, loud enough for the whole boat to hear. Girl, he said, come on, sit down. We'll just find you a new one. The woman gasped. Oh, oh. I sensed that the boat was now, the engine was moving again beneath my feet. The thought of correcting her mortified me. I focused my gaze on a tiny little patch of green across the estuary. Casey was now making his way to me, bouncing against the rock of the boat. Girl, he said, come on. If Lola didn't make it, then maybe she just wasn't meant to. The woman gasped. Oh, maybe, she pled to the skipper. Somebody can throw the little dog to us. Oh my God, I said. The thought of correcting her mortified me. I couldn't decide which was more important, the celebration or the means with which to enjoy it. Oh my God, oh my God. Oh, 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 oh. The skipper's patience was shot. If you two are staying on board, he was saying to Casey, sit now. I closed my eyes and threw my head back to the sky. Embarrassment, regret, anger, and disassociation all frolicked inside me. It was as though I was on a lift, looking down at the scene. Fuck! I screamed, Lola! Casey put his hands on my shoulders and began shaking me. Girl, he whispered harshly, clearly embarrassed himself. You've got to pull it together. Lola is replaceable. Oh! The woman gasped, her loudest yet. I sensed that the boat was now actually moving away from the dock. The crew had made up my mind for me. Sit down now, please. Casey led me back to our seats. I looked across the middle of the boat and saw the two men we'd stood in line with staring at me, pulling their looks away, dumbfounded, once they realized I could see them. The compassionate, crusading woman who'd become my court-appointed attorney sat on the edge of her seat, mouth agape, looking between me and the skipper. Oh. As we moved further away from the dock, it felt like no one on board said anything. Our watercraft puttered through the estuary towards the great South Bay. A second woman, in her 60s, looked at me from a few seats away. We've all been there, hon. Drink your juice, Shelby, Casey said, handing me my water bottle. We were nearly at the mouth of the estuary now. The expanse of the bay sparkled before us like an enormous, softly undulating blanket. I exhaled audibly 2 or 3 times in a row, like a baby tiring of his bout of blubbering. Excuse me, where you leave the dog carrier? I looked up. The skipper was looking at me from the front of the tiny ship, holding a black corded device, a radio to the mainland. I can have someone get your dog and mind it, he explained. So it lives? Oh, I turned towards Casey, my eyes widening. Help me, I tried to say with my expression. My friend just lifted his eyebrows and shook his head. Girl, I think you have to tell him, he muttered. It wasn't a dog. It felt like tearing off my own skin to get the words out. I couldn't bear to look at the first woman, so I closed my left eye and kept staring at the skipper out of my right eye. It was a bag of... Just then, the vehicle tripled its speed with a rocket propulsion effect. We'd cleared the estuary. The wind and engine swallowed my voice. I crumpled down against my seat, staring at the floor as we began bouncing almost violently across the water. End scene. Spring, April 2012, Manhattan. I stood outside a building on 18th Street in the western portion of Manhattan's Chelsea neighborhood. I opened the door and went inside. I was now in a waiting room on the second floor of the building. I was vaguely aware of a television monitor propped high on the wall in front of me. It procured a captioned short segment in which a young black man sat on a bed with a young white man. They talked about sex. I looked away from the screen, my mind flashing back to the morning after I'd returned from Miami. I'd been on the phone with Vera. I had unprotected sex in Miami, I blurted out about 2 minutes into the call. And this is really hard for me to say. And I do feel that you judge me on this kind of stuff, Vera. And I'm sure I'm saying this wrong, and it's my own stuff. I'm reflecting back on me and all of those other things that I'm supposed to say, but it's just, that's how I feel, Vera. I could practically hear my sponsor's wheels turning over the phone. Darren, when I was a lot younger, I had an abortion almost halfway through the pregnancy. I, I, this still sounds so weird to say out loud, but I am not sure how else to say it. I didn't know I was pregnant, Darren. I wasn't, well, it makes no difference what size I was, but I literally did not know, Darren. That's how out of tune I could be with what was going on with me. Darren, it sucked. So I changed how I was acting for a good while, but a couple years later, I was back at it and I got pregnant again. This time I felt like I had to have it. In hindsight, I'm not sure I did because I realized it much earlier, but I had all this, I felt very guilty still. So 7.5 months later, I gave birth. I can't avoid wondering, what if he ended up with somebody who didn't treat him well? But then I think to myself, I think, well, if he comes from me, then I know he's strong, right? I know he can push through a lot, right? Early on that time, I had told the guy about it, but he wasn't going to stick around. That was clear. I did have a friend though, and he was fun. I really don't think Clark would have been the absolute best dad in the world, but he was honest. He did listen. He, oh, he wanted to help me raise it. He really wanted to be the father. I was at the end of my second trimester. I was thinking to myself, hell, between the two of us, this could work, right? Then he got sick. I knew it came next. I'd seen it already. Topeka was his friend too. She had to decide whether to be with him as he was going or be with me as I gave birth. And she chose him, and I don't blame her, and I am glad actually, but I was alone. 9 days later, they were cleaning out his apartment. The sounds of the tape going on the boxes, it's like it was 2 weeks ago, Darren. They were so loud, moving so fast. All this banging. My breasts were like rocks and they hurt and they were full. And I was heartbroken, but I couldn't bring myself to go tell his parents what kind of son they had. So I turned on the TV and I curled up in the corner of the apartment, farthest from the door. And I stayed there. It wasn't long after that, I was coming home one day and I had to pass his old door at the top of the stairs to get to mine, and I saw outside his door a thin, square-shaped package box propped up. It was addressed to him. The new tenant hadn't seen it yet, I figured, so I took it. It was a vinyl album. He must have ordered it just before he died. She was already his favorite. I put it at the back of my closet, and that is where it stayed for 24 years. 2 years ago, I got it out and I hung it above the couch, true blue, so that now he can have some good sunshine on his face. When I heard that, I sobbed. Darren, I'm just trying to say one more thing. The point is, sex feels amazing, doesn't it? It feels even better without a condom. But then again, does it? Is that thin little slip of rubber really such a sacrifice when you consider the alternative? Darren, see? I was snapped back into reality. I was no longer on the phone with Vera. I was in the second floor waiting room of the Callan Lord Community Health Center, and someone had just called my name from behind me. July 4th, 2013, 2:30 p.m., Fire Island, New York. Down on this first level of the ferry, it was stifling, whereas the top deck of our ship had benefited from the cooling effect of breeze. Now there was no circulating air. It was darker down here, too. Oh, with only a card in front of me, I wrote down my drag name and passed it to the attendant, who'd pass it to Pansy, the grand dame. With only four people in front of Casey and me, I fanned myself anxiously, wiping sweat from my brow. How's my hair? He cocked his head. Well, you have hair. He tried pulling down my bangs. Oh, yeah, my bangs are just gonna be really short, I muttered, feeling my nerves and heartbeat swelling. You're really something, he said. Thank you. You too. I turned from him, facing the ship's open portal. On the other side of the threshold, the mid-afternoon sun sparkled off the notched aluminum platform, supporting the Grand Dame's throne. At the end of the dock/runway yearned tightly packed globs of people. Each diva who walked the red carpet seemed swallowed whole at the end of her walk. The ocean of onlookers was 6, 8 deep, spanning hundreds of feet to the left and right. There were now just three people in front of Casey and me. I swallowed. The world awaiting me was characterized by music and sunshine and open air and bombastic color. In some ways, it was the opposite of the environment I currently stood in, characterized by, relatively speaking, dark and stuffy quiet. At this exact moment, as I stood just feet shy of the sliding door threshold, there were shadows. It was as though we were standing inside of a cavern waiting to step into the light, or in the womb approaching birth, preparing to move from 2 dimensions into three. Oh, Jesus, you make me. I clumsily dropped to my knees, blocking out the melody tumbling into the boat from the speakers on the left and right edges of the dock. I imagined the opening sounds of those guitar strings heralding the entrance of the superstar at that concert 25 months ago. Bum, 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 bum. Girl, Casey was glaring down at me. Another girl ahead of us exited the boat to a chorus of screams. There I knelt in the long, mysteriously nostalgic polo shirt that some stranger in the Ice Palace had insisted on lending me an hour ago. The telephone receiver, still attached to my waist, was still dangling from the cord. It was so funny. I had the idea back an hour ago in the Ice Palace to keep the receiver just as one of my helpers was about to remove it. It looked ridiculous, dangling there from my waist, bouncing continually off of my lower right thigh. It was impractical, and it was a low-key miracle it hadn't already been inadvertently torn off. And now it made more sense to me than most things in life did. It would be my microphone. Girl, what the? Casey was practically yelling. I was crawling forward, the sandpaper-like floor of the boat tearing into my knees. I reached back for the long crossbody strap attached to my duffel bag, dragging the bag to me. I crawled forward again. What felt like fine gravel continued to dig into my knees. Girl, are you really doing this? I have to. It's just something I'm doing for myself. I'll tell you later, okay? I said to Casey. There was now just one girl remaining in front of me, and she now strutted off the ship, waving at the crowd. Noisemakers blared. A man standing on deck fired confetti and glitter out of a tube. I watched them float back down like magical fairy snow. Girl, are you absolutely certain you're doing this? Yes, I have to. Well, then fine, girl. I'm taking your bag. Thank you, girl. I cried over my shoulder. Still on all fours, I lifted my right arm up in front of me. I imagined a human-sized plastic cat door at the threshold, now inches before my face. Half of the invasion staff on the dock were turning to see who'd be coming next out of the boat. Me! Right arm suspended in front of me, I hobbled forward along my other limbs. I was suddenly scalded by the aluminum bridging of the dock and ship. Fuck! I screamed, shit! I dropped my arm and made like the girl from The Grudge as I gremlin crawled to the relief of the red carpet. My heart pounded through my eyebrows and cheeks. I stopped, still on all fours, pitching forward to get my body weight in my hands. I maneuvered my feet into a leapfrog weight-bearing position, rocking back into a deep squat. I threw my eyes first to the stadium-sized audience, then to Pansy, the grand dame, who was looking at me from her throne, mouth agape, mic in hand. I threw my hands to the receiver, lifting it up like a Statue of Liberty as I pulled my shoulders back and pushed my feet into the ground. As I grew towards my potential, I smiled at the world before me, the sun beating down on me. As the sun beat down, I smiled at the whoops and hurrahs cheering me. In the crowd, I saw a boy watching me. The hands of his father rested on his shoulders from behind. I made it, I panted to myself. Pansy, the grand dame, was now lifting her microphone to her mouth. I made it! I yelled, throwing my left arm in the air. The din from the harbor's 1,400 bodies amplified now, its collective roar reverberating down the dock through my body. I brought my right arm down from the sky, holding my microphone to my mouth. I sang my final three words bluntly, muscularly. I made